All right, today on 30 Minutes of Your Time, we are here with Rahiem Shabazz, the Rahiem Shabazz.
That's right.
How you doing today?
I am doing great. I actually woke up in perfect harmony, aligned with the ancestral light, operating at our frequency of 432 hertz.
Okay. Rahiem Shabazz is a filmmaker, author, a journalist, and an activist. So, Rahiem, we're going to get straight to it. We're going to start out with your filmmaking. So, you've been in this game for how long?
I want to say close to 30 years.
30 years.
Yes.
That's a long time as a filmmaker. You have made some films that are very notable. You are an award-winning filmmaker. Can you tell us a little bit about your first film?
Okay, before I say about my first film, when I say 30 years, that's in the realm of entertainment, whether it was writing, for urban-driven publications. As far as the film, within the last 20 years, but my history and my portfolio spans 30 years. With the film, many people know me for my documentary, award-winning documentary series, Elementary Genocide 1, 2, and 3. The first one was Elementary Genocide, School to Prison Pipeline. The second one was Elementary Genocide 2, the Board of Education versus the Board of Incarceration. And the third was Elementary Genocide 3, Academic Holocaust. But before that, I did a few short films. I did some feature films. One of them, most notably, was The Sun Will Rise, and that's what really got me into the game. And then I did another movie called The Kissing Bandit, which is, I worked on it. I was one of the producers and actually consultant on that film. And it's actually on Tubi right now, doing very well.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. So you go beyond documentaries.
Oh yeah,
You
absolutely,
okay.
absolutely. I actually have another film that I'm going to be doing at the end of this year, which is like a romance film.
Okay.
And then I have another one that we finally finishing up on as far as script writing. I'm writing it, and that one is called Justice by Grace, and it's almost like a legal drama.
Okay.
And it's definitely rooted in a tradition of Black Power. So I think people's going to be excited about that one.
Okay. So what drew you into filmmaking?
My thing is this: I was a journalist, and as a journalist, someone that reads a lot, someone that writes a lot, you have a way with words, and so I started out writing scripts. I wanted to be a screenwriter. As you may know, that's a hard game to get involved in. Although individuals was interested in my scripts, it was like, okay, we'll do this, and we're gonna make some changes. And in the end, when the credits roll, you the co-writer.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, I'm not trying to be a co-writer. And I had one film, actually, The Sun Will Rise, that Hollywood was particularly interested in. But the money that they was offering me, I couldn't get my clothes out of the cleaners with that. You know what I mean? It might have been a significant amount to others, but I knew my worth, And then I was going to get a co-writer's credit. So I was like, you know what? I might as well do it myself. You know what I mean? And skip the traditional Hollywood route. Now you got to remember, this was over 20 years ago that I wrote the script. But those that are trying to get in the industry today, the playing field is much leveled. You know what I mean? You can do it yourself and skip Hollywood and things like that.
Right. So how do you choose the subjects and the themes for the scripts that you write?
Well, with the documentary, I wanted to do something that was near and dear to my heart, something that, that resonated with me, that I did the research on. You know what I mean? I didn't need no research team. The research was already there. It was something that I had wrote about years before I even had the concept or the determined idea to do documentaries. And that was on the School to Prison Pipeline. It was something that, I'm a product of that. I actually went from the schoolyard to the prison yard. So, there's so many dynamics that goes with that, the type of education you get, the neighborhood that you live in. When I was doing the research, I found out that 85% of the inmates in New York State prison only come from 7 different neighborhoods.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And these are some of the roughest neighborhoods in New York City. And I come from one of them. You know, I
Wow.
was a product of that. And I'm like, wow. So maybe if I was born in another neighborhood, I wouldn't have been here. You know? So you start,
Possibly.
yeah, you start
Possibly.
thinking that I was a hardhead. Yeah,
Yeah.
for me personally, you know, my dynamics is a little different because it wasn't the neighborhood. You know what I mean? I had
Mhm.
brothers that lived in the same neighborhood. They didn't go to jail. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Rahiem was hard headed. Rahiem didn't listen and he wanted to do what he wanted to do. But it
Mhm.
did play a factor, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Because I was around people that was a part of that criminal element. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I was young, I watched them, and I wanted what they wanted. And I
Yeah.
would make sure that I got what they got.
Yeah. And we all know that two kids can be born to the same parents and turn
Yeah,
out totally different. What
absolutely.
attracts one doesn't attract the other
Mm-hmm.
because we are all individuals, even
Yeah.
though we come from the same environment.
Mm-hmm.
Our character and our integrity and everything, it's all different and it all plays a role. So we are all a product of our environments.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we take different parts out of that environment that resonates with us and that shapes us into the people that we become ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a brother that's 1 year older than me, and we played in the same sandbox.
Hmm.
And some of the things I was involved in and I was doing, like he looked at me like you
He
crazy.
would never.
Yeah, he would never, you know, and it just what it was, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? And some of the things that he was into, I was like, nah, that ain't me, man.
Hey,
Yeah.
so we know that your environment played a role in the themes for your films.
Hmm.
Are there any areas where, or were there any particular parts of a film in the filmmaking journey that caused you to change?
That caused me to change.
Like, were there aha moments in the filmmaking journey while you were making the films, where you something just sparked in you and caused a change in Rahiem Shabazz?
I wouldn't say during the filmmaking process, but what I will say is during the screening, you
Mm,
know, individuals coming up to me and was like, wow, you know, this really resonate with me. You know, I currently have a child that's in the 4th grade. And what you
mm-hmm,
said when you mentioned about those that are not reading on grade level, by the time they're in the 3rd or 4th grade, there's a 75% chance they're going to end up in prison.
mm,
My son fits that criteria, and I'm going to do everything I can and all within my power to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm like, wow, you know what I mean? So it was really helping people. And then years down the line, a young lady came up to me. I was at the Malcolm X Festival, if I'm not mistaken, and she was like, "This is my son, and her son is taller than her now." And she was like,
mm.
"We came out to your first screening, and he's getting ready to go to high school and different things like that." And she said, I made him watch a documentary 3, 4 times, each one of
Wow.
them. And she was like, he's getting ready to, you know, go to high school or either graduate high school. And I was like, wow. She was like, I just thank you for what you do. So it was moments like that where that was my aha moment, where I was
Yeah.
like, wow, this is really doing what, you know what I mean, it's supposed to
You
do
meant for it
and
to
beyond
do.
what I thought it could do.
Yeah. That's actually pretty deep because that is such a fulfilling, rewarding moment
Hmm.
to know that your work has impacted so many on that level. And you possibly like saving life. Not possibly, you are saving lives.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
appreciate
Because those
that.
are things that a lot of people weren't thinking about before.
Hmm.
And then they see the documentary and then it sparks that thing in their mind. And that's really commendable. That's dope.
Thank you. I appreciate
So
that.
we're gonna pivot into the journalism aspect
Okay.
of your life right now. So when it comes to journalism, you know, this can be a very, very touchy place to operate
Hmm.
in. When you are reporting, how do you balance neutralizing the facts from your own personal opinions?
Well, it depends on what type of journalism you're doing. If you highlighting, just say you're writing a piece about an artist or something like that, um, you probably want to keep it neutral, you know, your feelings out of it and stuff like that. But if you're writing a think piece, you know, you're gonna do your research and you're gonna let the facts go where it goes, and then you're gonna put your personal opinions. As for me, that's how I operate. Most of the stuff that I'm writing in this day and this time is from pro-black perspective. So
Hmm.
my opinions, and everything about me is embedded in that, and I'm unapologetic with it.
Okay.
So
What would you say your most challenging story has been to report on so far?
um,
Probably a few. So let's go with your
I,
most
I I
challenging one or
I
two.
don't know about the
Hmm.
most challenging one, but I can tell you the topic matter is
Uh-huh.
always about police brutality. It's always about when I tell people the true narrative when they talk about black on black crime,
Hmm.
that there is no such thing as black on black crime, that's a narrative that the white supremacists use, because FBI statistics shows and proves that white people commit more crimes than black.
Hmm.
Crime is committed in proximity to where you at. You know what I mean? So most blacks live around blacks, white live around whites, the majority. So, when we talk about that narrative, a lot of people try to push back on it,
Hmm.
but it's mainly why everything got to be about race.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the biggest pushback that I get from my journalism and my writing.
And you do a really good job at reporting and speaking out for the underrepresented voices.
Hmm.
And that's another thing that I wanted to commend you on, because there are a lot of people who they won't speak up out of
Hmm.
fear, out of just the fear of like maybe losing their job or the world turning against them. But you are fearless. You
Yeah, it's just
you
like,
are fearless.
you know, I don't. I always been like this, you know what I mean? I don't,
Hmm.
sometimes, I look back and I try to reflect and I'll be like, yo, why more people, not speaking out, Um, and maybe it's because I've been through the fire and I don't
Yeah.
care, you know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
there's nothing you could do that was harsher than what was already done.
Hmm.
What they gonna do? Kill me? I'm gonna have to die one day. What they gonna do? Put me in jail? I've been there, I've done that, you know what I mean? That's not
Hmm.
fearful.
Yeah.
So when you survive and you come up in an environment that I come up in, there's no fear,
Hmm.
whatsoever at all. And it always been like that, especially for me.
And I know that your journalism stems from your activism. So when did your activism start?
At a very young age, at a very young age. Like today, if you ask any activist, right,
Hmm.
about police killings, the first thing that's gonna come to mind is probably
Rodney King.
Rodney King.
Hmm.
That's the most notable one. But in
Hmm.
today's environment, you talk about killings of blacks, not even police brutality. We're gonna say Trayvon Martin,
Yeah.
Erica Gardner,
George.
George Floyd, the sister Breonna Taylor, right? But
Hmm.
I go all the way back. I think it was 1986. I might be telling my age here,
Wow.
but Eleanor Bumper,
Mm.
who was, I think it was 68-year-old or 86-year-old
Hmm.
grandmother out of the South Bronx, was going through a mental issue and the police was trying to evict her and they shot her hand off.
Wow.
So I go back to Yusuf Hawkins, Michael Griffin, and these are in the early 80s,
Mm.
so my activism and fighting against white supremacy goes back years and decades from
Hmm.
time. I don't know how old I was, and I'm not going to tell you because it was
Yeah.
so long ago.
And this kind of work can be so emotionally demanding.
Mhm.
How do you avoid burnout?
Well, for me, I have a close knit friends and families,
Hmm.
and every time you got to take a breather and spend time with them, on birthdays, holidays, what I
Yeah.
mean? Even if it's a European holiday, if it's a time to get together and to be amongst loved ones,
Hmm.
then that's what I do. So that's how I decompose from the nonsense that be going on.
Got you. So, as far as like self care without anybody, do you go out in nature? Do you go on long drives?
Oh
Like, do
yeah,
you?
absolutely, absolutely. Long drives always do it for me. I like being in solitude, and it's
Mm,
always something about nature and being next to water that really calms the spirit.
mm,
Because whenever you immersed in this type of work, you're not walking around every day, where your heart is contempt and
yeah.
everything is peaches and cream, and you
Hmm.
hello to everybody. Nah, you have to be on point. You have to have a certain type of mindset, but at the same time, you have to live your life too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you don't want to be in a position where you always in the process of being at war,
Hmm.
because then when peace comes, you don't know how it feel. I
Right.
know what war feel like, and I know what peace feel like,
Hmm.
and I would rather the latter.
Yeah. Yeah. The
But I'm
peace is
always
always
ready for
better.
war. I'm a frontline warrior.
We see. We see. You're definitely a warrior. Um, so let's pivot into your book writing now.
Mhm.
Um, how do you how do you approach writing books differently than you approach writing films? Do you journal?
Nah,
You a journalist?
I don't journal. I've been working on my memoir, right?
Hmm.
And it's almost like journalism, or journaling.
Hmm.
But the only thing is, I didn't write it when it happened. You know what I mean? So I got to go back and, recollect, certain pivotal moments in my life that happened and write it down. So that's as close as the journalism I get. And with this book, um, like I said, I'm a journalist, I'm an author, so everything was just full circle,
Hmm.
just coming back from the film world to putting everything back on paper.
Is there a specific message or a theme that shows up in all of your writing? Like if you could weave a theme in between all of your projects, is there a specific theme that has the stamp of Rahiem Shabazz on it?
Um,
And if not, weaving through like the journalism and the book writing and the film, is there a stamp that goes for the books and a stamp that goes for the film and a
I
stamp that
would
goes for
I
the
wouldn't say there's a
recording?
Pacific stamp, but I'm very, very intentional about having a message in there that resonates with Black America. You
Mm,
know what I mean? So in anything that I do, whether it's my clothing line, Wingy,
mm-hmm,
right? The word Wingy means abundance in Swahili. And I believe that if you have it in abundance, it's always good to give, because those that give don't go broke. You
mm-hmm,
get your blessings by giving. So that comes back to us. We're the most giving people.
mm-hmm.
My writing is always going to have that militant pro-black undertone to it. So everything always is always going to be a message in there. The movie that the script that I'm almost finished with, that we're gonna be shooting soon,
Mm-hmm.
Justice by Grace. It has it's not totally pro-black, not one of those type of films, but it has a pro-black message in there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It has an underlying thing. And, as a person, I write for my people. You know what I mean? I
Mm-hmm.
write, from the lens of what I see in the world.
So when you're writing, is it more of a healing process for you?
Um, yes, I would say that it's a tool. It can be used as a weapon, and it can be used as a healing tool, depending on the subject matter and how I feel when I wake up. Is
Mm-hmm.
the- is
Yeah.
the sword. The
Yeah.
pen is the sword.
It could be a healing method for you to write it down, and it could be a tool for others when they read it and they take the points out of it and go apply
Absolutely,
it to life.
absolutely.
Because like you say, you've already applied it to life. That's how you know how to write it down. You're getting it out of you,
Yes.
and you're pouring it into whoever reads this book. And
Hmm.
you mentioned your new book
Yeah,
earlier.
that's it.
This is it. Introduce it.
It's called Radical Hope in the 21st Century by Rahiem Shabazz.
Mm-hmm.
And this book is a testament to, you know, the struggle and the fight, you know, that we as Black Americans have been enduring in the last couple of years. That actual picture is a picture of me at the Foundation Black American Reparations
Mm-hmm.
rally in Washington, D.C. Monumental moment in my life. So I use that as the picture of that book. And we talk about reparations, we talk about the disparity in economics when it comes to Black and white.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the civil rights era and what's going on today. And we just touch on every issue that deals with Black America.
Okay, cool. And I just got my copy
Okay.
because you just dropped the book,
Yes.
and I had to make sure that I hurried up and got my copy. I wanted it in my hand ASAP. So I'm gonna get started on it, and I will be reporting back to you about this book
Okay.
very soon. Um, as far as like your life overall, the things that you do now, the things that you've done in the past, is there anything else that you would like to tell the people about Rahiem Shabazz?
Let me see.
Is
Let
there
me
is there
see.
anything you want to share from your past that you feel like might help someone today? Anything.
Well, one of the things I would like to tell people is that, you know, I came up in a time where my neighborhood was riddled with crime, right? And I was one of the individuals committing crime, and I was a havoc, and I was able to pivot from that and turn my life around. So in this time and in this age, everything happens so fast, right? People don't take a moment to look at a person and say, you know what, he's young.
Mm-hmm.
He's not even 25 years yet. You know what I mean? The front lobe of his brain is not fully developed. So the part of his brain that deals with reason and analyzing is not operating on the level of adult. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So, you know, we know that society will treat you like an adult, will treat you like a child and punish you like an adult, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to give a message to everybody. You see these young brothers out here, give them grace. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They in a Detroit, you know, Detroit Red era. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they gotta transition and become Malcolm X.
Yes.
And that's my message to people.
That's the message to people. So if there is
To
a
our people.
to our people, if there is a young man that just happens to stumble across this podcast and he's out here being a knucklehead or a
Mm-hmm.
YN or just going down a shaky path at this moment, what would you say to that young man, being that you were that young man at one point in your life?
Be very, very careful because there's no loyalty in the streets. You know, the streets will kidnap you and return you back to your family to bury you.
Mm,
You know, there's no loyalty in the street. There's no honor amongst thieves. And a lot of people that you're around and that you perceive as your friend, when them handcuffs is placed on you, they're not even gonna write you. They're not gonna come see you. You
mm.
know what I mean? And
Cold world,
yeah, it's a cold world.
lonely world
It's a lonely world.
on the
So
other side of them bars.
you gotta be very careful out here
Gotta be
in
careful.
these streets.
All right. So, what do you hope that people take away from your body of work across all platforms?
Well, you know, I know that the type of work that I do is going to stand the test of time, right?
Hmm.
So I want it to be a testament to the time that we lived in, you know, some of the things that we went through and how it was able to make us go forward and make us better as a people,
Hmm.
you know, because when you look back on history, you know, they went through a lot of what we went through,
Hmm.
you know, but to be honest, they had it much harder than us
Yeah.
and they had very little and they was able to do, you know, magnificent things
Hmm.
as we are today, but we have a whole lot more to work with. You know, with the advent of social media, more black people becoming millionaires, more black people becoming entrepreneurs,
Hmm.
and there's really no glass ceiling, you know,
Hmm.
to hold you back. You just got to have the will, determination, and being prepared when that opportunity comes. And one thing again, you got to be consistent.
because you spoke on how they had it back in the day versus how we have it now.
Hmm.
Yes, we do see some similarities there, but like you said, it is a little easier for us now. And back then, when things were segregated, do you feel like segregation harmed us or helped us?
Oh, it did us. When we were segregated, we was in a way better position. So
Yes.
integration definitely harmed us. And Martin Luther King in his last dying days, he said that he felt that he sent his people into a burning house. That's what he told Harry Belafonte.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see that all around us. We had every institution, whether it was education, health, banking, and
Mm-hmm.
we was operating, as a civilized society,
Yep.
and we had our own.
And I feel like we loved each other more.
Oh yeah,
We respected
absolutely,
each other more.
absolutely, absolutely. And then we wind up integrating. We wind up
Mm-hmm.
taking on the norms and the ways of our open enemy.
And fighting for the attention of
Yeah,
others.
yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
all that did was make them rich and make us more poor.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, I know we kind of took it back a little bit, but
No,
now
that's
we'll take
cool.
it forward. Um, Thank you so much for giving me 30
You're
minutes of your
welcome.
time. This has been a blast. I really appreciate you.
Okay.
And eventually we will circle back and we'll do another 30 minutes with the Rahiem Shabazz.
All right. All right.
Because this brother has a lot to say. Very, very intelligent brother. And tell the people how they can find you and how they can follow you on social media.
You can check me out on every single platform at Rahiem Shabazz. I kept it simple.
At Rahiem Shabazz. And you have a podcast yourself, actually, Necessary Blackness. Will you
Yeah.
be reloading that?
Yes, we actually in the process of doing that now. Took a little break from it because one thing about doing a podcast, you have to be consistent
You
with it.
have to be
You have to
consistent.
be consistent. We got up to about 156 episodes,
Mm-hmm.
but I had to pivot from it and do some other things. But yeah, we reloading it and we getting back to it. And for those that don't know, Necessary Blackness podcast is a podcast about us, and for those that have a love for Black people and Black culture,
Mm-hmm.
and it's necessary. The Blackness is an affirmation of who we is
Mm-hmm.
and what we endure, and you would never ever in your entire life see anybody that's non-melanated on that platform.
There
Not
you have
saying that
it.
I won't do an interview with someone that's non-melanated or
Mm-hmm.
you know anything like that. But for that platform, that's for us, by us. And I think, there's something that we have to have that we don't involve nobody else.
Yeah.
Not their opinion, not their thoughts, not their ideas, anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Necessary Blackness is. It's a podcast for us.
Yeah. And
And,
that's necessary.
I'm going to give a disclaimer. If you're non-melanated, this is probably not the podcast you want to listen to. Yeah, it's just probably not, and it boggles my mind that those that are non-melanated tune in and have the most to say, and it's just
Of
like,
course.
wow, I was speaking to my people, and I didn't say nothing to disparage anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I just made sure that this message was specifically and directly for my people, and there's certain people that don't like that.
Yeah, they don't like that because certain people tend to feel entitled to any and everything, even if it doesn't have anything to do with them. They feel entitled to voice their opinion. And you know what? That's fine. But don't get mad when,
Yeah,
it backfires or
yeah,
someone
absolutely.
comes back at you.
Yeah, a
So,
lot of times I might say something depending on the time of day and how I feel, but I just I let my supporters handle that in the comments.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they ruthless. They
Hey,
ruthless.
hey, sometimes
Somebody
honey,
got
that
to do it,
blackness is
right?
necessary. Somebody got to do it.
Yep.
I appreciate you, Rahiem Shabazz. You can see the handle below, Rahiem Shabazz, all social media platforms. All
So,
right. Peace.
peace.